أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we have been studying from the words 24th word, 10th principle. And this should be somewhere around page 357. So the topic for the past couple months, we have been studying the topic of prophethood. Once we studied whether there should exist prophets, why shall I believe in prophets? Then came the question of how do I benefit from prophets, and then prophets' narrations. How do I interpret narrations? Because there are many narrations. Some of them are challenging to understand, let's put it this way. And in this third branch, there were 12 principles that the author was presenting us, how to approach Hadith narrations. We studied 9 principles so far, and now we are going to study the 10th principle, inshallah. And we need somebody to read us the 10th principle. Who is going to read it?
Who is the volunteer?
Ahmed is volunteering. Okay, let's go with Ahmed. Thank you.
The 10th principle. Like with most of the other sorts of creatures, among mankind are certain individuals who are extraordinary by virtue of their acts and deeds. If those individuals have advanced in good deeds, they have been the cause of pride of mankind. Otherwise, they have been the cause of their shame. Also, they are hidden. It is as though each becomes a collective identity and imaginary goal. Other individuals try to emulate them, and it is possible. That means being absolute and indefinite. It is possible for such a perfect, extraordinary person to be present everywhere. In regard to this indefiniteness, according to logic, his universality may be posited in the form of a possible proposition. That is, it is possible for all acts to produce the following result. For example, whoever performs 2 rak'ahs of prayers at such and such time has performed the equivalent of the Hajj. It is thus the truth that at certain times 2 rak'ahs of prayers may be the equivalent of a Hajj. Due to its universality, this meaning may apply to all prayers of 2 rak'ahs. That means what narrations of the sort refer to is not in fact continuous and universal. Because since there are conditions of acceptance, it disallows it being continuous and universal. It is either in fact temporary and absolute or possible and universal. That is to say, the universality in this sort of hadith is in regard to possibility. For example, backbiting is like murder. This means someone who indulges in backbiting is more harmful than deadly poison, like a killer. And for example, a good word is a deed so good, it is like freeing a slave. Here, in order to encourage and restrain, it points out the possibility of that indefinite perfect individual being present everywhere in absolute form, as though it is actually the case, thus arousing eagerness for good and disgust for evil. Furthermore, the things of the eternal world cannot be measured on the scale of this world. The greatest thing here is not equal to the least thing there, because the merits of actions look to that world. Our worldly view is narrow for them. We cannot fit them into our minds. For example, whoever reads this is given the reward of Moses and Aaron. That is to say, all praise be to God, sustainer of the heavens and sustainer of the earth, sustainer of all the worlds. His is the might in the heaven and the earth, and he is the mighty, the wise. All praise be to God, sustainer of the heavens and sustainer of the earths, sustainer of all the worlds, and his is the sublimity in the heavens and the earth, and he is the mighty, the wise. And his is the dominion, sustainer of the heavens, and he is the mighty, the wise. What has most attracted the attention of the unfair and the unthinking is narrations like these. The reality of the matter is, with our narrow mind and short views in this world, we know how much we imagine the rewards of Moses and Aaron, peace be upon them, to be. The reward the absolutely compassionate one will give to one of his infinitely needy servants in the world of eternity and everlasting happiness, in return for a single invocation, may be equal to the reward of those two, but equal to the rewards as we conceive of them and surmise them to be. For example, there is a primitive, uncouth man who has never seen the king and does not know the majesty of his rule. He imagines a lord in a village, and with his limited ideas thinks of the king as a more exalted version of the lord. Long ago, with us even, there was a simple-minded tribe who used to say, "Our lord knows what the sultan does as he cooks his bulgur soup on his stove in a saucepan." That is to say, they imagined the sultan in such a narrow situation and so common a form that he cooked his own wheat soup. They supposed him to have the majesty of a captain. Now, if someone was to say to one of that tribe, "If you do this work for me today, I'll give you as much majesty as you think the sultan has, and give you a rank as high as a captain." To say that is right because of the majesty of kingship, what enters the narrow bounds of his ideas is only the majesty of a captain. Thus, with our worldly views and narrow minds, we cannot think as much as the primitive man of the true rewards which look to the hereafter. It is not the equivalent of the true reward of Moses and Aaron, peace be upon them, for according to the rule of similes and comparisons, the unknown is compared to the known. The true reward, which is unknown for an invocation of one of God's believing servants, is compared with the reward that we know and surmise. Moreover, the surface of the sea and the heart of a droplet are equal when it comes to holding the complete reflection of the sun. The difference is only in quality. The nature of the reward, reflected in the mirrors of the ocean-like spirits of Moses and Aaron, peace be upon them, is exactly the same in nature as the reward that a believing servant, who is like a droplet, receives from a Quranic verse. They're the same in nature and quantity, while their quality is dependent on capacity. Also, it sometimes happens that a single word, a single glorification, opens a treasury of happiness that was not opened with 60 years of service. That is to say, it sometimes happens that a single verse may be as beneficial as the Quran. Also, the divine effulgence which God's noble messenger, peace be upon him, who manifested the greatest name, received from a single verse may have been as much as all the effulgence one of the other prophets received. And it would not be contrary to the truth if it is said that a believer who through the legacy of prophethood manifests the shadow of the greatest name receives, in accordance with his own capacity, and in regard to quantity, a reward as great as a prophet's effulgence. Furthermore, reward and merit are from the world of light, and one world from that world may be contained in a speck. Just as the heavens and all its stars may appear in a tiny fragment of glass, so luminous reward and merit like the heavens may be situated in an invocation or verse, which acquires transparency through pure intention. Conclusion. O unfair thinking, self-centered, caviling man, whose belief is weak and philosophy strong, consider these 10 principles. Then do not make the pretext a narration you thought was contrary to the truth and definitely opposed to reality, and point the finger of objection at Hadith, thus casting aspersions on the noble messenger, peace be upon him's sinlessness. Because firstly, these 10 principles and what they entail will make you forego denial. They say, if there is any real fault, it is ours. It may not be referred to the Hadith. They say too, if the fault is not real, it springs from your misunderstanding. In short, if one embarks on denial and rejection, one first has to deny these 10 principles and show them to be false. Now, if you are fair, after pondering over these 10 principles with due attention, Do not attempt to deny a hadith your reason considers contrary to the truth. Say, there is either an explanation or an interpretation or an exegesis of this, and do not criticize it.
Jazakallah khairan. So this was slightly wrong principle, but it was giving examples. I think this is what it was. Slightly.
Just slightly.
Yeah.
I got tired slightly.
But he gives multiple examples to make the point. Just a very brief summary. Like we do hear narrations like, whoever performs 2 rakats of prayer at such and such a time has performed the equivalent of a Hajj. So either we will say this is an exaggeration, or because Hajj is one of the pillars, and the other one is just somebody praying 2 rakats of prayer somewhere. Like it's not even obligatory prayer. One is of obligatory act that should be a pillar of somebody's submission. So it's Hajj is so central. The other one is somebody praying 2 rakats of prayer somewhere. So how is that the case? Shall we just say that since it doesn't fit our understanding, would we go and say that, oh, probably somebody just made it up so that it's going to be like, I don't know, encouraging people to the prayer? Now, the author is taking a different approach here.
Or discouraging Hajj.
Okay.
We don't need to go to Hajj.
Just to do it like that, yeah. The other example he gave was there was this supplication, which was a little long, written in the italic text. So somebody who recites this will get the rewards of Musa and Harun, another narration. And then you say, wow, like Musa and Harun are 2 prophets. And me, by just uttering these words, am I going to get as much of reward as 2 prophets? Like this sounds very far-fetched. Like since such narrations come, and if I take the attitude of, ooh, like it looks like either an over-exaggeration or far-fetched and whatnot, we might get a tendency to say that, well, maybe this is fabricated and whatnot. But author's approach is a little different here. Before I'm given like whatever opinion, any comments, any questions? Yes. Can we pass the microphone Ahmed, to Sister Zareen?
I actually had a question about the example talking about the 2 rakat being equivalent to Hajj. So Imam Nursi later says that this could be applied to any prayer of 2 rakat, and I guess he was intentional in leaving out like the details of like what specific times these were. And so I guess I was confused as to how to take that, as in, because it feels like kind of what Brother Birkan was saying, like, oh, you can just pray any 2 rakat that it might be equivalent to a Hajj. I don't know. I guess that could be encouraging in a sense, but at the same time, isn't there a wisdom in mentioning like the specific time or the specific context that the narration mentions? I guess from what I understood, Imam Nursi was saying, that might place a limit on the sorry, I lost my place. But it sounded like having that particular time or having that specific like saying might put some sort of limit on the benefit you can receive from it, is what I...
As you're passing the microphone to Brother Birkan, I'll just add a few other narrations that just happened out to I happened to hear today, for example, fasting 6 fasts during Shawwal is like fasting for an entire year, which Khatib mentioned today in khutbah, or like these 10 nights that we are in, and some pious people are fasting today, unlike me. So like it's so rewarding to fast in these days. So there are narrations as such. So what shall we do, Brother Birkan?
I would just say something much simpler. There is the ambiguity, that the translation is not that clear with regard to the point you raised. As it sounds a few places as if author says it will apply to any 2 rakah, so it is you can gain from any 2 rakah. But what he's trying to say, as much as I understand, because it is not specified what 2 rakah, you will look for it in every rakah. As if, I say, in this room, there is somebody who is holding a key to a secret treasure, right? I didn't say who this person is. So it is possible that anyone in this room can be the person. So that's the meaning. He's not like, or in this example that I gave, I'm not saying that everybody is holding the key, but it can be anybody. So the same way, he says, because it is not specified, it can be any 2 rakah. So you will try to make any 2 rakah of yours. That 2 rakahs, the referred. I think, it clarifies the thing here.
Yeah, so if I say Khidr is in the room, then probably, come on, Atik, no, he cannot be Khidr. But, since I said he is one of the guys in here, you wouldn't like to risk. I gotta say, treat Atik like Khidr, like likely that you don't want to mess up with Khidr. So even Atik might be Khidr, so you never know.
We're in my story.
Yeah. So, because the example he gives here is backbiting is like murder. So, like murder, backbiting. So, but now the author is saying that this means there exists certain backbitings which is as bad as murder. So taking this the case, then when I'm going to backbite someone, have the urge to do backbiting, I would say, well, you know that this can go the spectrum of backbiting, although it sounds like just a fun event, when we are eating, seeds, sunflower seeds. This is nationally what Turkey, like, is the best time for Turks to gossip, right? When you're eating sunflower seeds. So human meat goes well with sunflower seeds, I guess. So this when we consume. And Birkan, Birkan's house, it's not that good actually. So, but there exists such gossip that is as bad as murder. This is how I should be reading it, these narrations.
But you shouldn't read it also as, because the way you explained it sounds as if not all gossips are bad. There are some of them which are, like murders, but not all of them. But the author says just the other way around. Take every gossip as a means to murder. So every gossip could be that gossip referred as being murderous.
Then how am I going to eat sunflower seeds after this? Don't take away my sacrifice. Yeah, positive gossip, yeah. Okay, so this is why, and then I'm going to just reread the first few sentences, maybe. Like with most of the other sorts of creatures, among mankind are certain individuals who are extraordinary by virtue of their acts and deeds. If those individuals have advanced in good deeds, they have been the cause of pride of mankind. Otherwise, they have been the cause of their shame. Also, they are hidden. So when Quran mentions about, like, I guess in general, the idea of saints, you don't know who is a saint, or Khidr being just a mysterious hidden guy, but there's a point. So anybody could be as such. So treating people with this sort of a respect is a potential outcome of not highlighting them and putting your finger and saying that, okay, this is Khidr, so that you can treat anybody and everybody in this regard. So then comes this example with whomever reads this, or this supplication, let's say, is given the reward of Moses and Aaron, Musa and Harun. And the praise is, all praise be to God, sustainer of the heavens and sustainer of the earth, sustainer of all the worlds. His is the might in the heavens and the earth, and he is the mighty, the wise. All praise be to God, sustainer of the heavens and sustainer of the earth, sustainer of all the worlds, and his is the sublimity in the heavens and the earth, and he is the mighty, the wise, and his is the dominion, sustainer of the heavens, and he is the mighty, the wise. So I guess, as now the author is saying that, okay, I just uttered these words. Am I as virtuous as Musa and Harun? As this, what that is saying? Because I recited it, right? His explanation here is interesting. So he gives the example of a simple-minded people. But I guess if I were to say, Ahmed, today I'm going to give you a feast like a king. And then I prepare like biryani, both meat biryani and chicken biryani, and also have 2 types of rice and a good salad. Ahmed would say, that is really like a kingly feast. And since in Ahmed's perception, this is what a king would look like, I didn't lie. I really gave him the luxury of a king for that day. But in fact, what, like, would a real king even taste it? Probably they will get it as an insult to say that, well, are you inviting me to this thing? So when such a narration mentions the rewards of Musa and Harun, your understanding of Musa and Harun's reward is going to be given to you. But after mentioning this, I guess this metaphor makes it understandable. After mentioning this, he gave some extra information. He talked about even Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's understanding from a single verse could be as much as a prophet's entire life's gatherings. Why did he add this extra information in there? A prophet, another prophet, lives an entire life conveying the message. And then he says, let me read it from here. Also, it sometimes happens that a single word, a single glorification, opens a treasury of happiness that was not opened with 60 years of service. That is to say, it sometimes happens that a single verse may be as beneficial as the Quran. Also, the divine effulgence which God's noble messenger, ﷺ, who manifested the greatest name, received from a single verse, like the benefit that Prophet ﷺ receives from a single verse, may have been as much as all the effulgence of the other prophets received. Why is he giving this example? Like, what is the point? What shall I take out of this comparison?
Our prophet is better than others.
Our prophet is the best.
I don't know if this is too oversimplified, but I was just thinking, to summarize, it seems like it's the quality that really matters over the quantity of, I guess that's a common saying, like also in general, just focusing on quality over quantity. But it seems like, at least in myself, I see this kind of tendency to quantify like worship, like I have to do this number of whatever supplication in order to get the reward. But here I feel like it's saying that it depends on how much you've truly learned and manifested the divine names. So and that doesn't depend like on how much you do something. It's about whether you've truly learned what you needed to learn, I guess.
So let's read it in the case of Prophet ﷺ. Let's say in the prayer or after a discussion. After a discussion, we study a verse, and then it might even be a verse that you have recited for throughout your life. We study Surah Al-Fatiha. And you get so excited in the discussion saying that, oh, I've never thought about this. How deep is Quran, right? Maybe we just study what Alhamdulillah means. It sometimes happens after the discussion. I do see that people are getting excited. You can see the excitement in their face. And then, as if this statement is saying that, how much did Prophet Muhammad ﷺ get from those verses? Because it sometimes happens that you attend a discussion and you say that this discussion was worthy of my past 5 years. Like the amount of, depth I received, to the extent that I get to know about my creator. Because it sometimes happens that after the discussion, people say, ooh, what happened to my 15 years of past life? Because you realize that, during my 15 years past life, I have been believing that, as we were having a conversation today at Drexel, water really gives me life. But then, as we discuss, you realize that water is not giving you life, not even partially having a share in there. So my 15 years has been gone. But this discussion is worthy of my past 15 years. It's undoing those past 15 years. And this is just studying a single verse of Quran. Now, how much can I imagine Prophet's understanding of a single verse? This one was, the reason I think author is highlighting this point is to open up a conversation about our perception of the prophets and prophets in general, but also Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Because sometimes we might fall into the trap of, it was 14 centuries ago. They didn't know about it. Now we have 14 centuries of scientific endeavor, scientific knowledge. Today, a professor, especially a learned person, depending on what your surroundings are, we might feel like, I know more than the prophets. And because at Prophet's time, we didn't have kalam. Even if we are referring to Islamic sciences, we didn't have kalam, Islamic philosophy. The Arabic language was not as formally defined as we have today. They were the experts of language, but formalization of those into sciences happened later on. This is why actually we feel the comfort to say that, when a tough narration comes, we don't know what to do with this narration, right? I might have a tendency to feel like, it was 14 centuries ago. And Prophet was not a learned man anyways. I start imagining prophets benefit from a single verse. Today, ChatGPT is at the tip of our hands, right? I don't know if anybody has used since the beginning of the discussion. Probably somebody did. It happens, right? I start the conversation and people are doing something. If it's not tweeting, if it's not sending somebody a text message, sometimes it's happening that, well, where is this narration? Or what does ChatGPT say about this, right? You did? Okay, somebody used ChatGPT. Thank you. So Prophet didn't have this, but now it's at the tip of my fingers. Like how much we might have this perspective. Now the author is putting into perspective about the quality versus quantity thing. So what is the benefit of the prophet, who is the person that speaks those words to us from every single verse? It says even a single verse, what he got from a single verse could be as much of another prophet's entire life. This is an interesting thing to put into perspective. Why does he say that? Like, how comfortably can he say that, though? Now, he is making a distinction among prophets, right? Any comments, any questions?
So I will change the direction a bit. You put the emphasis on don't take it as you know more than prophet. But the text also says the other way around as well. He says, and it wouldn't be contrary to the truth if it is said that a believer who through the legacy of prophethood manifests the shadow of the greatest name receives in accordance with his own capacity and in regard to the quantity a reward as great as a prophet's effulgence. So I think the emphasis here is on this greatest name, Ism Azam. And if we go back to his saying that if you articulate, you will receive the reward given to Moses and Aaron. All praise to God, sustainer of the heavens and sustainer of the earth. And then it continues as, you know, the Lord of all the worlds, Rabbul Alameen. Wise, all praise to be God, sustainer of the heavens, sustainer of the earth. Sustainer of all the worlds, and he's the sublimity in the heavens and the earth. So encompassing everything. And it's touching upon this, what is it, the translation for Ism Azam again? Yeah, the greatest name, or let's say the greatest understanding of the Creator. Just to make a contrast, to make it maybe more understandable, at least what I'm trying to say. Today I show the interview with a settler in Palestine. She's one of the famous ones, I don't know. And the interviewer asks, you know, why they are doing this. And she says, I'm trying to give my children as much as I can, right? I'm trying to provide them. And the guy says, but there are other children there as well, these Palestinians. They also need something, right? Why you are taking away from them and giving your children? Don't you think this is kind like a bit weird? He used another word, sociopathic. And lady says, no, this is normal. I'm just, you know, trying to give my children. So this is a Like, and she's a religious person, and I believe she's genuinely religious. Like, she's devoted. But she's devoted to a creator who is the Lord of a single nation, not anyone else. This is the way she sees the Lord. And I would say then, a believer, Muslim or not, doesn't matter. It's not the comparison between, Judaism or Islam. A believer who realizes that the Creator is the Lord of everyone, regardless of their religion. I mean, what they claim to believe. That's what I mean with the religion. Regardless of their claims about the religion, regardless of whether they are believer or not, He's the Lord of everyone, taking care of everyone. So everyone has right to exist and, to live, etc. A simple believer who has such an understanding would receive higher reward than whoever, a prophet or not, whoever taught this lady what she believes in. Okay? So this is not the comparison anymore between people. This is the comparison of the extent that you understand the Creator. So then, we can read this text as whatever we think about Moses or any other prophet, what they brought as a message, and what their followers, how their followers implemented that. However we see it, if you can reach a point that is more encompassing than that, you can say that you receive a reward higher than this, the person who brought this guidance. Because you have a better understanding of the Creator. Okay? So it's not about the comparison between you and the prophet Moses. It is comparison between your understanding and the understanding that these people, follower of the Moses, represent. Or the understanding that you understand from Moses' story. Because we also, when we read the story of the Moses, most of the time we read it as a ruler of a certain nation, a guidance tailored for a certain context and a nation. That's how we understand. But when we look at the message, the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ, we realize that the Lord is bigger than that understanding. He is more encompassing. He is the sustainer of all the worlds. And you get it only from the teaching of Muhammad ﷺ. Right? The way we approach the teaching of the Jesus, for instance, we don't know what he taught in details. We only have access to whatever we know about him, and however these people who claim to following Jesus implements in their life. And I would say the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ is in the higher state than the teaching of the way I see the Jesus ﷺ. Right? I will make the comparison this way, not between Muhammad and the Jesus, but the teaching of Muhammad I benefited, and teaching of the Jesus as I see it. So why this is important? This is important because also, just like in the settler example, You cannot treat people as, my people, other people, the Muslim people, non-Muslim people, etc. The people are people. They are all slave and the worshipper, knowingly or unknowingly, of the same Lord. You have to look, or let's say, only when you look all the creatures, not even all the people, just all the creatures, including the stones or ants. In this way, when you only see that everybody is the slave of the same Lord, just like myself, then you can say that I am following the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ. But if you take it as, the Turkish people, Urdu people, the Bengali people, Egyptians as well, not all the Saudi Arabian, maybe some of them, we are in the same camp, but not the others. When you start seeing the world as this, and we're not talking, like the text is not talking about you. You're not getting these rewards.
Can we also pick up a little bit on the quality quantity thing? Everybody talks about it. Yes, we know the importance. But what is it about? Let's revisit it. Because practically, what is it? He mentioned that a believer let me read it from here. And it would not be contrary to the truth if it is said that a believer who, through the legacy of prophethood, manifests the shadow of the greatest name, receives, in accordance with his own capacity and in regard to quantity, a reward as great as a prophet's effulgence. Effulgence in here is the word used for benefit. Let's put it this way. Faith, like the Arabic word for that is faith. So he says, a believer can receive in quantity as much as a prophet does. What does this then? What does quality mean? What is quantity? What is quality? And how could this practically affect us in a positive way or a negative way? Yes, brother.
The very low hanging fruit of that is like when you truly know and benefit from the meaning of something, it's way more like important in your life than repetition, than like I want to say mindless repetition, not altogether mindless, but not taking the time to truly understand stuff. That's why I think that all of us at some point have read a passage that like really, really, really strikes us. And I think that those are the moments where you benefit most from scripture or the hadith or whatever it is that you read. Mm-hmm. So I think in those moments, like once Allah puts that not inspiration, but like that understanding in you, like it doesn't matter if it's small, as long as you get that effect.
So what's happening is sometimes, let me start from let's say from my class, data structures. Like at Drexel, we teach data structures. At community college, they teach data structures. And at Penn, they also teach data structures. A student from community college, let's imagine community college student is here, Drexel student is here, Penn student is in here. They all see pretty much the same names of the topics. Like in terms of quantity, they have seen the same topics covered in those classes. And if we were to start having a conversation about it, they say, oh yeah, sort. Yeah, we have seen sorting. Yeah, I know what the sorting looks like. I know what graphs are. I know what these are. I know what that are. All of them got the point. But probably the depth or the quality, the rigor that are covered in these three colleges are different, and students' depth of understanding are different. And this will manifest itself when they apply it, which is in their professional life, right? In terms of discussions, let's say, we are covering a topic. I mean, people attending discussion are all Muslims, right? We are talking about prophets. Everybody believes in prophets. Like even like our first time comers, 2 people here, for instance. You guys believe in prophets, right? You guys believe, yeah. We have been studying prophethood for 5 months. So, and probably 2 years later, we will come back and restudy prophethood again. Is it just, would it be just a mere repetition of the same thing? Or would it be increasing the quality of my understanding? Because if you think about the number of topics, like how many verses are there in Quran? Like if you were to do keyword analysis and whatnot, here are the topics in Quran. And yeah, I even memorized Quran, one would say. I know Quran. I even know it by heart. I memorized it, right? But what is my quality of understanding? And when I'm going to revisit a topic, which is pretty much what we do in prayer, like you do the same prayer every day 5 times, you recite the same Surah Fatiha for how many times every day throughout your life. In terms of quantity, Prophet recited the same surah. Like quantity-wise, we are equal. We could be equal in this regard. But quality-wise, where do I stand? I think this shows itself more so when we say, oh yeah, I also know it. Or I have heard about this before. Or we covered this topic before. But Quran also sometimes repeats the same verse as it is. So it sounds like waste, like this was mentioned elsewhere. Or in, like, I guess the most striking example of this would be Surah Rahman. How many times it says فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ in there? Like 18 times, 19 times in a single surah. Like same verse repeats again and again and again. So then what's the point of repetition? Quality. Because with repetition comes your quality. Your understanding of quality is like depth is coming from there. Otherwise, repetition is not to increase quantity because number of topics are there. So, and you can just say that, okay, I know 19 times, okay. But why do I repeat it? So that the quality increases. In my life, events will happen. Every day my creator makes me hungry so that I eat dinner. Every day he makes me so that I drink water. Quantity-wise, it's water. Yeah, there is one item in my life, it's water. But my need for water, is it increasing my thankfulness? How much can one be thankful to their Lord, their creator? Drinking water, probably someone who is living in a village in Africa where access to water is limited, they will appreciate water more than any one of us. So the quality of their interaction with water is way more than ours. They drink the same cups of water as you are. Quantity-wise, we are the same, but the quality differs. So in this regard, in my life, where does quality lay? And this is, I guess, by giving the example of Prophet, saying that there is this pupil and there's a large spectrum. And where does, as Brother Birkan was highlighting, then what made Prophet's benefits, quality of benefit more? He mentioned the greatest names then. He was able to observe the same event from more of divine names perspective. if I am only looking at it from one perspective, that much I will benefit from it. But to the extent that I observe all the divine names in that act, my benefit will increase. There was some comment coming from there, but it was a little reluctant.
I guess there's one point that I'm a bit confused upon regarding the quantity aspects, in that, like with your I was reminded of this with your example of someone in Africa appreciating water more. I guess from that example, isn't it that the quantity of water is in fact limited for them? So, and due to that, that may like result in that person appreciating the water more, whereas maybe like me here in Philly, I have access to water, alhamdulillah, but maybe I don't, with that bigger quantity, I don't appreciate it more. So I guess, can we really say that it's the same quantity wise? Because even in the examples, I'm also trying to think of the examples of the prophets, peace be upon them, where we do have an example like Sulaiman alayhi salam, who was a king and who had a lot in terms of like worldly quantities. And then thinking about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a choice to not live in a context where you have all these worldly things, I guess, where that seemed to be a choice where, I mean, I feel like that choice was made for a reason. So it got me to thinking about maybe more so if there is a role of quantity.
Well, let's think about it together. But what I had in mind when talking about quantity is, it is water, like just one entity. Yes, I might drink more water, but if you were to ask what is water, I know water. And the African kid also knows water. It's one entity in both people's worlds. But for one, water means so much. For the other, water means so little. Like the value of water, although it is the same entity, a single entity in our lives, for one, it's so deep, it's so valuable. For the other, it's not as valuable. Think of it this way. I know Surah Al-Fatiha, you know Surah Al-Fatiha. In terms of quantity, I say, yeah, I know Fatiha. You say, yeah, I also know Fatiha. But when it comes to the quality of what we mean when we recite Surah Fatiha, the depth is different. So in this regard, I'm not referring to how many times I recite Fatiha versus how many times you recite Fatiha. But in our worlds, we would say that, yes, I know Fatiha. But the depth is different. Why I am feeling like to emphasize this aspect of it, I mean, there might be other aspects of it, but the reason I would like to highlight this aspect of the topic is, especially in this age, gathering knowledge became a thing. Like, I know more, I know less, or even sometimes we read more I mean, there's this attitude to buy more books and put them in my shelves just so that I have opinion about everything. Like, rather than trying to get a deep understanding for the purpose of my life and appreciation of my creator, there's this attitude of, like, when the conversation arises, I should have a few words to throw there. I mean, this is, of course, a caricaturized version of how secular lives are. But even sometimes this happens with religious aspect as well. Like, I would like to get something of this religious knowledge, that religious knowledge. But do I get the depth of it? Do I benefit from that? So I think this aspect of that knowledge touching me, that knowledge changing me, truly meaning something for me, like quality-wise, this is what matters. If I was able to explain my problem. Alish, Ali.
Something that just came to my mind was like also the same thing that we learn. For example, you said 2 years from now, we might repeat the same content, but 2 years from now, I'll be in a different stage in my life. I would have experienced different things. So the way I understand the same thing would affect my heart differently, potentially. So that just the conversation of quality and quantity, it reminded me of that you can have the same entity of one thing at a different time, and maybe it has a different sense of quality in your life, even though it was the same entity. Yeah, that's just.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself in this situation. I'm trying to catch myself when this happens. We are having a conversation with someone, or it's just Juma khutbah. Juma khutbahs are not too deep things. It's a reminder. And then when Imam talks about something, sometimes I find myself in the mode of, I already know that. And I don't listen to what Khatib is saying. Even maybe Khatib is going to say something superficial, doesn't matter. But it's an opportunity for me to get some insights, because other than the person who is uttering the words, it is the divine message that's coming out of this mouth. So potentially there's always this treasure there. My attitude of, oh, I already know it, is blocking me to get anything out of it. So quantity-wise, yes, I heard about this message before. Like today's khutbah at Penn was about Dhul Hijjah and its benefits. I mean, every year we hear the same thing. So then I say, oh yeah, I know that. And it looks like Khatib is younger than me, so what can you tell me? Come on. So if I take this attitude, quantity-wise, it's blocking me to get anything quality-wise. And it's also reflecting that I am missing the point of the quality versus quantity. And this attitude bleeds into even when it comes to what Prophet understands. That's why the author now highlighting that Prophets benefited more because he looked at it from multiple divine names. So now I should say, oh, I looked at this verse before, but from which divine name was I looking at it? Maybe I was just considering merciful. How about all knowledgeable? How about the wise? How about the, like, Aziz, Jabbar? Like, there are many verses, many divine names. Look at them from different lenses, because the speaker is not only merciful, the speaker is also Al-Jabbar. So when prophets, like prophetic tradition, then is looking at it from all these angles, this is where those different benefits were coming from. So rather than saying that, yeah, I heard about it before, just say from which angle was I considering it back then. So being open to this can give me a more in-depth benefit from those, any of those verses. Yes.
Trying to tie back all this to our main topic, the prophethood. What new we gain from this text and the discussion that would, expand our understanding of the prophethood. And it seems this text treating the prophets as the different ways of looking at the reality, looking at your world. Okay? Some prophets would, again, from our perspective, some prophet would emphasize certain names and certain aspect of the reality. Let's make it concrete. When we look at the ayahs regarding the Moses, and what we know about, the Judaism today, we see that the idea of hereafter is not much emphasized, but it's more about this world. right? The ruling of this world, how you should live in this world, how to make this world, worthy of living, etc. Your relationship with your Lord within this world. That part, we, see the emphasis, focus. With Isa alayhi salam, things change a bit. There is this idea of hereafter. But this time we don't see a huge connection between this worldly life and the hereafter. There's even a separation, again, from the way the people, the followers, they're living it. There's no separation, like there's no emphasis on this life is a field for the hereafter. Whatever you do in this life is what you will get in the hereafter, right? There's no such focus there too. You just live a nice life, nice meaning, in a pious, let's say, life. Believe in Jesus, don't hurt other people, etc. Be a good person. But the worldly affairs doesn't matter. They don't have much value in that. There's a separation between state and the church, right? We say. So, but the hereafter is there now. When you look at the Islamic understanding of the hereafter, now we have the hereafter, and it is completely tied to this world. This world becomes the field of the hereafter. Whatever you do in this world is important. It is about the religion. It is about the hereafter. And there's a strong connection, right? You get hereafter in a way that you understand it in this world. Whatever you understand in this world about your Lord is whatever you will get in hereafter. This is the understanding from the Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, right? So we see such the shift in the focus, let's say. So then the prophet, the definition of the prophet is also changing in our minds. The prophet is the one who brings a new focus to the life. With some prophets, we will see the focus in somewhere else, right? Sometimes it is about fighting against the kufr, the unbelievers. Sometimes the focus is on being a nice person. And we see the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, is unite all these different focuses, all these divine names. In that regard, we say there's, the not superiority maybe, but more encompassing, we would say. I think it changes the way we approach the Prophet as well.
So then I'll just reread the conclusion part, and then I guess we'll finish a little early today. Conclusion, this is a conclusion of those 10 principles so far. O unfair, unthinking, self-centered, cavilling man whose belief is weak and philosophy strong. Consider these 10 principles, then do not make the pretext a narration you thought was contrary to the truth and definitely opposed to reality, and point the finger of objection at Hadith, thus casting aspersions on the noble messenger's sinlessness. So, like the approach in here is interesting. You read a narration and you say, well, this is not fitting my understanding. It's against reason or something of that sort. But the author is saying that by taking this attitude, you are criticizing the hadith and eventually criticizing the messenger's sinlessness. What's bad about this? You're discrediting teacherhood of the messenger, which in terms is going to harm you. So be aware what you are doing. Because firstly, these 10 principles and what they entail will make you forego denial. They say, if there is any real fault, it is ours. It may not be referred to the hadith. Because some of those 10 principles were saying that among narrations, there are things which are the knowledge of the narrators. Some of them are the scholars, narrators, in their past life used to be scholars of Christianity or Judaism. They converted to Islam. Their knowledge converted to Islam with them. So what they provided as an interpretation of hadith was narrated down as the part of hadith itself. Like, leave room for such, if you like, side effects. This is what he is referring to. This is just one of the examples of 10 principles we mentioned before. But do not point finger on prophets' words, saying that, like, prophet was saying such stuff. Come on. Then criticizing the prophet himself is going to have a super side effect on you. They say too, if the fault is not real, it springs from your misunderstanding. Also leave room for your misunderstanding. You're not the all knowledgeable. Maybe your understanding is crooked. In short, if one embarks on denial and rejection, one first has to deny these 10 principles and show them to be false. Now, if you are fair, after pondering over those 10 principles with due attention, do not attempt to deny a hadith your reason considers contrary to the truth. Rather say, there is either an explanation or an interpretation or an exegesis of this, and do not criticize it. This author is gave us tools to approach hadith. I mean, these are tools that are given to common people. Like, he didn't talk about how many different types of narrations there are, what does it mean to have a sound chain, this chain, that chain. But for common people like us, who are just asking ChatGPT for any interpretation at any point, and then ChatGPT is going to say, oh yeah, this is weak, this is this is that, and then it gives me a room to say, oh, okay, it's not his, then gives me some tools to deny and get away with it most of the time. But giving us this sort of a measure saying that just pose, maybe the problem is with you, or maybe the problem is with those what we mentioned. So rather than seeing prophets, and he mentioned prophets' level of understanding at the end as well. I think this is important to locate myself relative to prophet as well. Saying that just be aware of where you stand and where the words of whom we are talking about stand, and then take your respectful position. If you are not able to benefit from it, do not criticize it. Rather, put the blame on yourself. So we will conclude here today, since we have people who are fasting, so we need to do Maghrib and then let them have dinner. Any concluding remarks? No? Okay. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.